This is Lesson 1, an Introduction to Excel, and we're in Workbook Lesson 01, Introducing Excel. Whether you're an expert with Excel or a novice, sometimes it's kind of nice to just take a step back and get an overview of Excel and get an idea of what other people are using Excel for. And I think you might be surprised its amazing capabilities. We have here several sheet tabs down below, which we'll talk about later. I'm going to go through several of them to give you some examples about what Excel is used for. The most common use is probably creating simple tables or ranges of data where we can do things like second half 2017 sales. Here we see July through December with some sales numbers, expense numbers, and then Excel is calculating the profits and the year-to-date profits, as well as some other numbers dealing with expenses and profits. On the tab called Forecast, we see a 2018 forecast. Here the information is broken into quarters, as well as the individual months. This is also quite typical. Excel is very good at collapsing this data so that we could look at just the quarters if we wanted to, or we could simply look at each month. Let's now take a look at customers. Here we have a long customer list, and some useful aspects of Excel include things like breaking these first and last names into their own columns. So one column would have the first name and a different column would have the last name. Then we could easily sort them by the last name. Here we have a list of employees. A lot of things we could do with this data, as well as split out things like first and last name. We could also sort them to find all the ones that maybe were in manufacturing. Or maybe we could decide that we want to give them a raise, and we could give the same percentage raise to each individual, and then we could calculate what our total expense would be. Here we have charts. Now sometimes just looking at the data isn't enough. You need to visually see the information, and Excel is great at making charts. Here's an example of what Microsoft calls Smart Art. Smart Art are graphical objects, hundreds of them, that you can easily create. In this case, we have a flow chart. You simply click in it and add the text you want and add other elements to this Smart Art. Here's an example of pivot tables. You may have heard those. They're relatively new to Excel. Let me show you the power of something like a pivot table. Here we have a rather long list of data, but over here to the right we have something called a pivot table. And the pivot table has condensed all the data down for us. So here's just a few examples of the kind of ways people are using Excel